Welcome to the ADHC Talks podcast, produced by the Alabama Digital Humanities Center at the University of Alabama Libraries. I'm your host, Sarah Whitver. This video podcast documents digital humanities research through semi-structured conversations with DH scholars and practitioners. Our guest today is Dr. Amber Buck, Associate Professor and Coordinator for Composition and Rhetoric in English Studies at the University of Alabama. Amber's research explores how technologies influence writers, writing processes, and identities. She studies the ways that individuals use specific writing technologies and how they integrate these technologies within their daily lives. I have a personal connection and deep admiration for Amber, who directed my dissertation and is an amazing mentor and friend. Today, I invited Amber to talk about Computers in Composition Digital Press, where she is senior editor. CCDP is an imprint of the Utah State University Press and is committed to publishing innovative, multimodal digital books. The goal of the press is to honor the traditional academic values of rigorous peer review and intellectual excellence, but also to combine such work with a commitment to innovative digital scholarship and expression. Okay. Hey, Amber.
Hi, Sarah. It's great to talk to you today.
It's good to talk to you too. I'm so happy that you were able to join us. So we're gonna just dive straight into these questions that I always ask everyone. And the first one is my very favorite question, and I get some really fun answers, and I know that you have some nerdy in you. So I'm gonna ask, uh, tell me about uh uh, usually I ask about research, but today we're going to be talking about the press. So tell me how, like, what you do with the press and particularly what you like about the CCDP and what makes you feel nerdy.
Yeah,
Your
that's a great
why.
question. Thanks so much, and thanks for having me today. Um, so the Computers and Composition Digital Press, I'm currently one of three senior editors. So myself, Tim Lockridge, who's at Miami University of Ohio, and Crystal Van Coten, who's at Michigan State University, we collectively shepherd born digital scholarly projects from initiation through completion. Um, uh, Computers and Composition Digital Press is, of course, a under a university press imprint, and all of our projects go through peer review. Um, one thing I really enjoy working with the press is that one thing I really enjoy about working with the press is that it's digital scholarship, I think, is a really collaborative process. So the two other senior editors and myself spend a lot of time collaborating in terms of reviewing the projects together, discussing potential recommendations, and sometimes these are kind of editorial recommendations, right? But sometimes they're also technical recommendations, troubleshooting a particular thing that isn't maybe working quite as the author wanted it to. But the collaboration also really occurs with authors as well. So as people are developing their projects with us, we do also have a lot of it's a bit more hands-on than some editorial book series roles are, because we do have conversations. Sometimes we have conversations where we help an author imagine the different types of mediation that make sense for their project, or they have a lot of audio or video and they're trying to figure out the best way to present that to their audience. So, um, all of those parts of the press I find really engaging and important work that also and I just I personally really love that collaboration element. And in terms of nerding out, I guess I would say regarding the press, I'm always excited when an author thinks about a way to present things a little bit differently. One thing that I think the CCDP does is kind of push the boundaries of what um, book length scholarship in rhetoric and composition and digital rhetoric can look like. And we had one project, for example, that it's called Sound Writing Pedagogies. It's an edited collection, but you can also experience the entire book as a podcast, right? So we've also published projects that are video intense that one of them is actually a full-length documentary. So one thing that I personally nerd out about is thinking about how um, academic scholarship can translate into these different kinds of maybe more internet genres or, more traditional different kinds of media genres.
Yeah. I I agree wholeheartedly. I've read several of the books, several books, CCDP books. I think two of them that I'm thinking about right now are the Radiant Figures book,
Yeah.
which is presented nonlinear and is an edited collection with lots and lots of different data visualizations and graphs and things that are really interesting to look at, along with sort of meta-analysis and thought process for why a certain graph works better than a different one in order to communicate different narratives about writing program administration. And then I'm also thinking about Techne, which is Jonathan Alexander and Jacqueline Rhodes,
Yep, that's right.
which is very sort of much more like avant-garde video with audio and like really interesting things happening. And there's two completely different experiences. But I've used both of them in my scholarship, and I have learned a lot from both of them. And I love the way that they allow the user an immersive experience with choices. That's really nice. It's not something that you necessarily have. I mean, the only thing that I can think of that closely replicates that is starting in an index of a book and
Oh,
going back,
yeah.
depending on like
Yeah.
where you're finding the content in the index and reading it, like that's the only choice that you have with a print medium that is put
Yeah.
linear in that regard. So, uh, yeah, the experience of um, multimedia immersiveness in it is enjoyable as a user, but also as somebody who engages in that kind of multimodal writing, I am quite familiar with the fact that um, it is a whole new skill set, right? So
Yeah.
you have to be beyond whatever the subject that you're writing about, you also have to learn a lot of technical skills. And a lot of times we are self-taught, which can be a, a really fulfilling journey, but also it requires us to get over a fear of asking for help, I think, for sure. Um, so I'm wondering, as authors come to you with their vision, like, do you ever have to tell them, well, this is the type of skill set that re is required for your vision, unless you can get somebody on your team to do this? I'm not sure how you're going to execute this.
We have authors come to us with different ranges of skill sets on these kinds of projects. And I will say that for scholars in the field, we are all pretty much self-taught. Very few of us have, although there are some, but very few of us have backgrounds in web design, art development, or digital creative media, right? Um, we do sometimes we're kind of doing two things. One, we're experimenting with a couple of different ebook formats that require fewer skills. We have a project like that that should be out that's in development right now. But uh, so that kind of lowers the barrier to entry for because as web development becomes more specialized, it's been harder and harder over time for academics whose primary job is teaching and research to keep up with those kinds of things. So even when you're self-taught, um, as I'm sure you know, the bar keeps changing,
Yeah.
and it gets a little harder for those of us who are self-taught to keep up. Um, the other thing that happens is that we do recommend to authors a lot to apply for small grants, either internal grants at their institutions or other small DH grants to help them do the web development part of it. And we have had several authors bring on a co-author or co-editor who has more experience in that area. So we can kind of like guide um, and mentor authors throughout the process, but it is up to them to do that design work. And oftentimes the authors do bring in uh, someone else to
Yeah.
collaborate with in that process.
Yeah. That's the same with the work that I help with at the ADHC, where, we don't have the budget to have technologists on staff
Yeah,
able to actually build content out for people. There are some digital humanities centers that do that,
yeah,
but they tend to be at very well-funded institutions. And what we have is the ability to install and keep up an instance of WordPress or Omeka.
yeah.
And uh, as far as design goes, you have what skills I have available to you as far as learning, but I also am unable to build somebody's content out. So it's more during the process, a lot of troubleshooting and looking at specific barriers, like how do I get this to show up as a gallery on my page? Or
Hmm.
how do I filter out my categories? How do I make word cloud with my tags?
Right, right.
So let's actually jump into the history of the press. Tell me, how long has it been around and sort of what is the journey that the press has been on? I know y'all, last time I talked to you, you were in the midst of a big move.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Computers and Composition Digital Press was founded in 2007 by Cynthia Self and Gail Haberscher. And those two scholars were really prominent at the forefront of thinking about digital literacies in computers and, well, in the computers and writing field, but in rhetoric and composition overall. And they were really the press was founded, I think, they because they recognized a need for scholars who worked primarily in digital work to have a venue to be able to publish book length projects that were digital, so that but had that were under a university press imprint with ISBN numbers, so that these scholars could use these projects for tenure and promotion. Um, so that was sort of the impetus for the press. The press published its first book in 2009, and since then we've published, one to two projects a year. I came on to the press in 2013 as the social media and promotions editor. So I was doing sort of um, kind of more like publicity, blog interviews with authors, social media promotions of our titles, and then I came on as a senior editor in 2020. So I've been, yeah, one of the senior editors of the press uh, since then. The press is definitely a labor of love. There's no the projects are open access, and there's no everyone involved is a volunteer. There's no money exchanged at all. So the I was Gail Hawisher's doctoral student while the press was being developed, and Patrick Barry, another advisee of Gail's, was also a senior editor for a long time. Patrick has just rotated off the press as a senior editor, and we've added Crystal on in the past year. But also this year, the press moved, while we're still an imprint of Utah State University Press, the web hosting has moved from Utah State to the University of Alabama. So the Department of English has been generous and in paying for our new web space. So we have a new online home. Nothing has changed from the public facing website side, but it is all of our projects are now hosted at the University of Alabama.
That's great. So you've got them here and you were able to manage that move. I know that it was a big deal. Um, so I suppose I'm what so you've been with the press for eight years?
12 years. Yeah.
12 years. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't do math. Math. So 12 years. You know what?
Yeah.
Know that because that's the year that my kid was born,
Oh, wow.
not eight. Well, 13. He was born in 13,
Okay, okay, okay.
started in 12. So a year longer than my kid has been alive.
Yeah.
I should be able to do better math in this life. I just can't. Um,
It
anyway,
doesn't feel like it's been that long.
yeah,
But
yeah. So I think earlier in our conversation, you were talking a little bit about like how the technology has changed for authors and how perhaps some of the barriers have been reduced with new web technologies. I'm wondering if you can tell us a story of um, perhaps, you know, back in your earlier experience with the press, somebody who really had an ambitious technological idea to execute and sort of what that looked like from the editorial standpoint. Um, yeah, I always
yeah,
like
I'm
under the
kind
hood kind of stories.
yeah, I'm not sure that I have a story like that, but I will say I'm gonna, I guess, kind of talk about a different kind of challenge that we've had. Is that if that's okay? This
Yeah,
is under the hood challenge.
yeah.
Um, uh, so we have an older book. It's Susan Delagrange's. Technologies of Wonder, I believe is what the title is called. And that project was built, it was an award-winning book the year that it was published. I believe it won a Four Cs award. And we've had several of our books win, those kinds of awards. But that one ran on Flash. And Flash does not exist anymore. And so in my time working at the press, what I've um, come to really understand is the challenges that proprietary software products present for for our work in digital humanities projects um, overall, because you are beholden to um, the the person who develops and maintains that software, and when they decide that it's that they're going to phase it out, it does create a lot of problems. And so we also had a similar issue with a more web-based project. So almost all of our projects now just run in HTML5 because we want to avoid these issues as much as possible. Um, uh, but we also have a preservation editor who periodically this since this position has been created. This has been a graduate student here at the University of Alabama who works with me and then collaborates with the other senior editors to review our older projects periodically and to try to keep them up to date. We had an issue where we have one book, it's called Stories That Speak to Us, and it's based entirely on it's sort of a curation of the Digital Archive of Literacy Narratives. So the Digital Archive of Literacy Narratives um, is an open access web archive of people from all over the country and the world telling literacy stories. And scholars use that archive for research, and lots of students use it in their work. Lots of writing classes utilize the archive and build student assignments around it. Um, well, the and this is part, I believe this was also part of an institutional move because the DALN used to be hosted at Ohio State University and it's now hosted at Georgia State University. And during that move, they rebuilt their website. Um, but their entire link structure changed with no redirects. And so a few years ago, a couple of it was our preservation editor working with another graduate student here at Alabama who had to go painstakingly go through the entire project, find the links in the new site, and redirect them. And so once our books are published, they're not done, right? We have to continually um, look back at them and uh, um, figure out what changes we need to make to keep the books active.
Mhm. Do you use any kind of link checker or any software for reviewing, or does your student just go through link by link and check everything?
We haven't. We might be instituting that as he works more on this. When we do replace broken links, we've been linking to the Wayback Machine. Uh, in most cases, that way, we'll have to do less of that in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How do you handle accessibility issues? I know um, with the publishing that we have of projects here in the library, if I create something, it has some very specific university-based standards for accessibility. But the projects that are put together, um, the accessibility is a lot more on the honor system of due diligence and trying to be aware of things. And we don't really go through and do any kind of auditing for accessibility. But ours are a lot less formal in the like we don't even talk about it being published as much as going live, right? It goes live. And so I'm wondering what are the issues that you usually deal with? Do you have basic ground standards for accessibility?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the I'd say values of the press when it started was to ensure that all of our projects were as accessible as possible, and that does present challenges with different types of digital media. So all of our projects, we require transcripts for all video for like specific types of transcripts for all video, for example. We also have been recommending to authors in our past few projects to not only include a transcript for that video, but also a text description of what is happening on the screen. And I think our two most recent transfer across media and our most recently published book, Living Digital Media, both include those. Um, and those are things that we kind of go through a lot of accessibility checks before we publish projects, and we work to ensure transcripts, descriptive video, alt text on everything. There are certain design choices, like sometimes we dissuade authors from certain types of pull down menus because they're not as easy, they're not as accessible, right? So there are also lots of design choices that we steer authors away from for those reasons too. So we have guidelines on our website for some of the accessibility recommendations, but this is like a constant process that we have with authors to ensure that everything is as accessible as possible.
Yeah. One of my student assistants introduced me to being able to put the accessibility functions into WordPress. So you have the option of like changing the WordPress into an accessible, like you can have those options that are inaccessible. And I haven't explored it too very much, but I've seen some very brief demonstrations and it actually alters the HTML into an accessible form where you can tab through things and
Oh, nice.
a little button that you can click right on the right side of the window pane, the web development pane.
Yeah.
I haven't explored it a whole lot, but I'm excited about that type of technology because I think, being able to kind of like when you're in a video game and you get a skin, you put a
Yeah.
skin over the basic stuff and it it automatically acts in a certain way that you don't have to code yourself, having like a overall addition of CSS that like just treats different types of content differently. I think sounds like a breath of fresh air as far as accessibility goes because it is hard. It is hard to make all of those things correctly and to not just like do it halfway.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it can double the time of a project because if your project isn't about that, you're having to describe and analyze things in a way that you never had to before. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
really appreciate when people do a good job of it. I find that in itself really fascinating. But I am very hopeful for the like the snippet that you can add to your CSS that will help with some of those accessibility issues and make it a little easier,
Oh,
especially if you're
absolutely.
coding it in HTML5, because that could be fun.
Yeah. Um, we also try to start this process with authors as soon as possible because if you when you're thinking about these things as you're building your project, it's easier than trying to retrofit
Yeah.
things afterwards. And
Yeah.
so
Oh,
we
yeah.
do start these conversations early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So along the journey that you've had here, can you tell me, do you have any aspirations for the future with the press? And what are the press's goals as you're looking forward? What what lays what lays beyond?
What lays to the future? Yeah, I think, well, we are experimenting with a couple of different formats for digital books besides the HTML5 web text. So that's something we're kind of experimenting with right now, and we're hoping that opens up more opportunities for authors who maybe have fewer or less developed web development skills, and would also lower the barriers to you know for it will help open it up for people who are not able to hire that person to help them, for example. So that's our primary thing that's happening right now. We're also constantly thinking about new ways that we can bring younger scholars in to the press, especially as I think there are some departments who, for tenure and promotion guidelines, are, wedded to that print monograph. But there are some that are that are thinking about more digital options. And so yeah, we're continually doing outreach to younger scholars. And I think there's a robust there are a couple of interesting areas in rhetoric and composition that emphasize sound, for example, and and video especially that we're hoping to kind of be a part of and cultivate as the press moves forward.
So exciting. Do you have anything that you would like to show and tell with? You have the ability to share your screen. If you would like to show us a couple of ex like maybe your favorite examples of things, um, which books you like, or it can all just be personal opinion or things that you think other people would feel were interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that I love all of our books equally. So uh I'm not I'm not trying to single any particular one out. But I can definitely I do think I can talk about our most recent release book because it does a good job of also talking through some of the things that we've talked about today. So I think it might be a particular interest to your audience,
Yeah.
um, because the author interviewed scholars who create digital media and kind of talked through and really did research on the affective dimensions of building digital projects.
Yeah.
So I can definitely do that if you would.
Yeah.
Can I share? I can share my screen.
If you can't, I'll fix it real quick.
All right, so can you see this? This is our homepage, Computers and Composition Digital Press. We're at ccdigitalpress.org, and our most recent publication is called Living Digital Media. Um, and like I said, it's about the author interviewed both scholars who create digital media, but then also video game designers, and really talked about some of the affective dimensions of creating these kinds of projects. So you can access, we also create trailers for all of our books, which I think are kind of fun. We share those on social media. Um, but you can access the entire book. It's open access on our website. And this book, a lot of our books give kind of overviews of ways of reading. To give like you were talking about, Sarah, earlier in terms of some of our titles allowing readers to skip around. Um, all of our authors really think of their readers as collaborators, and part of the experience of making meaning from the book, right, is the reader's experience moving through it. And so um, the most of our books have a kind of overview that gives you some directions on how to navigate the different type parts of the book. Um, I guess I would like to specifically um, mention chapter 4 is the stories about game developers. Um, and this chapter emphasizes kind of delivery and delivery meaning publication essentially and updates afterwards. And so a lot of the video that the author Rich Schreiber um, created included in this chapter is from a indie game conference that he went to. Each chapter of this book also has a video 3-minute version. So there are lots of different ways into a lot of our texts, including this one. You can kind of get the video in 3 minutes. There's also you get a good video transcript here, right? So, but this chapter takes you through the experience of game designers and that are based on his interviews, and then also include um, updates from, specific information from his research participants, and then his experience at the conference itself. So these I especially this might not appear great on the on the screen sharing, but I especially like the little motion graphics that he includes in some of these chapters of the space, so you can actually see what it was like. And then he describes several of the games and the game designers demonstrating them at this particular conference. But I just love the fact that you get to like see what it looked like there on the floor at the conference as well. So yeah.
Very nice.
So yeah, this particular book, sorry if I'm scrolling too fast. I'm just gonna go back to the beginning. But yeah, this whole book is available open access on our website.
Yeah, I will make sure to include a link to the press in the caption in our YouTube caption. Um, and it will also will this video will be captioned as well. So we will have wayfinding for people to come and
Perfect. That's great.
yeah, I'm excited for people to come and look at all of the really cool scholarship that's happening at your press. So, well, it's been really great talking to you, Amber. It's been so much fun. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to pop in and let me ask you a bunch of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me and yeah, giving me the space to talk about the press and the work that we do.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. I definitely I I'm I'm familiar with the current content, but I have not known the history of of the press. So that's a fun tidbit, and it helps me sort of situate it within everything that else that I know in computers and
Yeah.
writing, which is a very crossover digital humanities space. I remember a few years ago when I came to the computers and writing conference, there were lots of DH people there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this concludes our episode for today, and I am signing off until next time. So thank you all for sh sharing this with us.
Thank you.
This episode of ADHC Talks has been brought to you from the campus of the University of Alabama. This is Sarah Whitver. Join us again next time to hear more about DH folks and their super cool projects. Goodbye!